The year was 2287, and humanity had been a member of the Galactic Council for exactly 43 years. In that time they had played by every rule and followed every protocol, and swallowed every insult the elder species had thrown their way. Commander Jack Morrison stood on the bridge of the Earth, defense ship Valiant, and stared at the transmission that had just come through from the Council. Headquarters on Zentari Prime, his jaw tightened as he read the words for the third time. The message was simple, but it carried the weight of 2 million lives. In its cold bureaucratic language, Lieutenant Amy Parker sat at the navigation console, and her hands trembled slightly as she processed the same message on her screen. She looked up at Jack with wide eyes that showed a mixture of disbelief and rising anger. The Galactic Council had issued a decree, and it stated that all human colonies in the Outer Rim territories were to be evacuated within 30 days. The reason given was administrative reorganization, but everyone on that bridge knew the real truth. The Zephronians wanted those worlds for their mining operations, and the Council had simply handed them over without even consulting Earth. 2 million human colonists would be displaced. There were farms that had been cultivated for decades and cities built with human sweat and blood, and entire generations of children who had been born under alien skies and had never set foot on Earth. All of it would be gone, at the stroke of a pen signed by species who had never cared about humanity in the first place. Captain Helen Brooks entered the bridge, and her expression was grim and tired. She had just finished a conference call with Earth Command that had lasted 3 hours. The lines on her face seemed deeper than they had been that morning. She carried a data pad in her hand, and everyone on the bridge turned to look at her because they all knew she had their orders. Helen stopped in the center of the bridge and looked around at her crew before she spoke. "We have our orders," she said quietly. "We are to begin evacuation procedures immediately." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Jack turned away from his console to face her directly. His voice was controlled, but there was an edge to it that Helen had never heard before. "And if we refuse?" he asked. Helen met his eyes, and for a moment she said nothing. "Then we are acting outside Council law," she replied. "Earth would be sanctioned and possibly expelled from the Council entirely. Our shipping lanes would be closed and our trade agreements would be terminated. The economic impact would be devastating." "Maybe that is not such a bad thing," Amy said from her station. Her voice was harder than Jack had ever heard it. "Maybe it is time we stopped pretending that the Council cares about us at all. Maybe it is time we remembered that our ancestors did not ask for permission when they had to fight for what was theirs. For 43 years, humanity had endured so much. They had accepted trade restrictions that crippled their economy and made basic goods expensive on human worlds. They had watched as the Council awarded worlds that human explorers had discovered to other species who had better connections and longer histories. They had stood silent in Council chambers when human diplomats were mocked openly and called primitives and savages and children playing at civilization. The elder species treated humanity like an annoying younger sibling who should be grateful just to be in the room. But this was different. This was not about trade agreements or diplomatic insults. This was about their people and their homes and their right to exist where they had built their lives. Jack looked around the bridge at his crew. He saw the same expression on every face. It was not anger exactly, but something colder and more determined. It was something that had been building for decades while humanity smiled and nodded and played by rules that were designed to keep them down. Jack made his decision. "Helm," he said quietly, "set course for New Terra Colony. Maximum speed." The helmsman looked at Captain Brooks for confirmation, because technically she outranked Commander Morrison. Helen should have countermanded the order right there. By all rights, as captain, she should have relieved Jack of duty and placed him under arrest for insubordination. Instead, she stood there for a long moment and looked at the faces of her crew. She thought about the families on New Terra. She had visited that colony twice, and she remembered a little. Girl named Sophie who had shown her a garden her family had planted. Sophie had been so proud of the tomatoes they had grown in the alien soil. That little girl was 7 years old, and New Terra was the only home she had ever known. The Council wanted to erase all of that so the Zephronians could strip mine the planet for resources. "You heard the commander," Helen said finally. "Take us to New Terra." The bridge crew moved with sudden energy. Coordinates were entered and the ship's engines began to power up. Jack felt his heart pounding in his chest because he knew what they were doing. They were defying the Galactic Council, and once they did that, there would be no going back. The Valiant turned away from its patrol route and jumped into hyperspace. Behind them, the normal order of things began to crumble. Within hours, other human ships began to receive the same orders and make the same choices. Captains who had served faithfully for years suddenly found themselves facing a decision between loyalty to the Council and loyalty to their own people. One by one, they chose humanity. Amy pulled up a tactical display that showed the locations of all human colonies in the outer rim. There were 15 worlds marked for evacuation, and each one had a population that ranged from 50,000 to 3 million people. Where are they supposed to go, she asked. Earth is already overcrowded, and the inner colonies do not have the infrastructure to absorb this many people. They are counting on that, Jack said. They are counting on us to realize that evacuation is impossible, and to just give up the colonies without a fight. They think we will roll over like we always have. His hands clenched into fists. But not this time. Captain Brooks pulled up a communication channel to Earth Command. She knew she needed to report what they were doing. But she also knew that once she did, her career would likely be over. But some things were more important than careers. Some things were worth fighting. For even if you lost everything, as the Valiant traveled through hyperspace toward New Terra, none of them knew they were about to trigger the most significant shift in galactic politics in 10,000 years. They only knew one thing with absolute certainty. Humanity was done asking for permission. Humanity was done accepting insults and unfair treatment and displacement. The Galactic Council had crossed a line, and they were about to discover that humanity could bite back. The message Jack had read kept running through his mind. It had been signed by the Council High Administrator, and it had not even been addressed to Earth's government directly. It had been sent as a general notification, as if the lives of 2 million humans were just another administrative detail to be handled. That casual disregard for human life and human dignity was what burned the most. The ship emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the New Terra system, and immediately the sensors showed activity. Other human ships were arriving too. The defense fleet was gathering without being ordered to do so. Captains across human space were making the same choice. They had all reached the same breaking point at the same moment. Helen looked at the tactical display and counted 12 ships. It was not much against the power of the Galactic Council, but it was a start. Jack stood beside her, and together they watched as more ships continued to arrive. "This is it," he said softly. "This is where we make our stand." Helen nodded. "Then we better make it count." The Council Chamber on Zentari Prime was a monument to bureaucratic grandeur that had stood for over 8,000 years. 67 species had representatives in the Great Circular Hall, and each was positioned according to their seniority in the galactic community. The humans, as expected, sat in the outermost ring where they could barely be seen from the center floor. Ambassador Daniel Carter had held his position for 6 years, and in that time he had learned to hate everything about this place. 6 years of smiling politely while being ignored, and 6 years of carefully worded protests that went nowhere, and 6 years of watching his recommendations die in committee before they even reached a vote. But today was different. Today, Daniel was not here to ask for anything. Today, he was here to tell them how things were going to be. Ambassador Carter the Zephronian, representative, spoke, and his voice came through the translator with barely concealed contempt. The massive creature named Thexazaler shifted, his bulk in the specially reinforced seat designed for his species. "You're out of order. The evacuation decree has already been finalized. There is nothing more to discuss." Daniel stood at the speaking platform, which was a tiny raised circle in the center of the chamber. He was dwarfed by the alien architecture that surrounded him and by the massive forms of many of the elder species, but he kept his spine straight and his voice steady. "With respect, Counselor, I am not here to debate the decree. I am here to inform this council that humanity rejects it." A ripple of sound moved through the chamber. Some species made clicking noises while others produced what might have been laughter. The Valaxian delegate, who was a being of pure energy, contained in a crystalline shell, spoke with clear amusement in its translated voice. "Rejects it. That is not how the council operates, human. We do not negotiate with junior members. You will comply with the decree or face sanctions." Then perhaps Daniel said, and his voice carried through the vast space with surprising force, "It is time you started treating us as equals." The chamber fell silent. In 10,000 years of council history, no junior member had ever spoken this way. The elder species were used to obedience and gratitude from the younger civilizations they allowed into their organization. The matriarch of the Corvathian Empire leaned forward in her seat. Her species had held council positions for over 6 millennia, and she had personally served for 300 years. Her multiple eyes fixed on Daniel with something between curiosity and anger. "You forget yourself, Ambassador. Humanity has been granted the privilege of council membership. That privilege can be revoked at any time we choose." Daniel reached into his jacket and pulled out a data tablet. The movement was slow and deliberate. "Then let me remind you of a few things, Matriarch. In the 43 years since humanity joined this council, we have contributed more scientific research than any 3 other species combined. We have shared our medical advances freely, and those advances have saved billions of lives across dozens of worlds. We have asked for almost nothing in return except to be treated with basic respect." "You exaggerate your importance," Thexazaler rumbled. His species controlled much of the mining operations in council space, and they were used to getting whatever they wanted. Humanity is barely a century into space travel. You are children compared to the elder species. "Do I exaggerate?" Daniel asked. His fingers moved across the tablet and suddenly holographic displays flickered to life throughout the chamber. Numbers and charts and trade figures appeared in the air above each representative's seat. "Let me share some data with the Council. This shows the economic impact of human innovation on galactic civilization over the past 4 decades. The numbers were undeniable. Human technological advances had revolutionized everything from faster-than-light communication to medical treatment for diseases that had plagued the galaxy for millennia. Human agricultural techniques had ended famines on 17 worlds. Human conflict resolution methods had prevented 4 major wars between council species. And this, Daniel continued as new data appeared, shows every diplomatic crisis that human mediators have resolved, every trade dispute we have arbitrated, every scientific breakthrough we have shared freely with council members. And in return we have been marginalized and insulted and now displaced. The council believes humanity will simply comply because we always have before." The Valaxian's crystalline form pulsed with light. "And you will comply again, human. You have no choice in this matter. The decree has been issued and it will be enforced. If you resist, there will be severe consequences for your entire species." Daniel smiled, but it was not a pleasant expression. It was the smile of someone who had finally run out of patience. "Actually, we do have a choice. As of 6 hours ago, the Earth government has withdrawn from 12 major trade agreements. Human scientists have been recalled from all joint research projects. Our medical personnel have been pulled from council worlds, and our defense fleet has been repositioned to protect our colonies." The chamber erupted into chaos. Representatives shouted in 67 different languages, and the translator system struggled to keep up. Some species demanded immediate sanctions while others called for military action. The matriarch raised her clawed hands and a sonic pulse filled the chamber that forced everyone into silence. "You dare threaten the council," she said, and her voice was cold with fury. "You dare to hold galactic civilization hostage over a few colonies. Do you have any idea what you have done?" "No, matriarch," Daniel replied calmly. "We are simply done being the council's doormat. We are done accepting insults and unfair treatment. We are done watching while you take everything we have worked for and give it to species who contribute nothing. Humanity will defend New Terra and all our colonies. If the council has a problem with that, you know where to find us." Daniel gathered his materials and turned to leave. Behind him, representatives were still shouting and demanding action. The Valaxian called out that humanity would be crushed. Thexziller promised that the Zephronian fleet would reduce human worlds to ash. Other species that had long been jealous of human success piled on with their own threats. But some species remained silent. The Talarian delegate watched Daniel leave with thoughtful eyes. The Mishara representative made no sound. There were others, too, who had grown tired of the council's heavy-handed rule and who secretly admired what humanity was doing, even if they would never say so. Publicly, the matriarch's voice cut through the noise one final time. "The council will not forget this insult, human. You have made a grave mistake today." Daniel paused at the chamber entrance. He turned back one last time and looked across the vast hall at all the species who thought they were superior to humanity. "Good," he said. "We are counting on you to remember. We are counting on you to understand that the old ways are over. You can either accept that or you can try to stop us. Either way, humanity is done asking for permission." He left the chamber and the sound of argument followed him. Daniel walked through the corridors of the council complex, and everywhere he went, alien species stared at him. Some with anger and some with shock, and a few with something that might have been respect. His communicator buzzed constantly with messages from Earth Command and from human colonies across the galaxy. By the time Daniel reached his shuttle, the news had spread across the entire council network. Humanity had defied the Galactic Council. The unthinkable had happened. A junior species had said no and backed it up with action. Within hours, the council would vote on sanctions. Within days, they would dispatch a military fleet to enforce their will. But Daniel knew something the council did not. Humanity had been preparing for this moment since the day they joined. Secret shipyards had been building warships. Hidden bases had been stockpiling weapons. While the council dismissed humans as primitive and weak, Earth had been getting ready for war. As Daniel's shuttle lifted off from Centauri Prime, he looked down at the gleaming capital of the Galactic Council. It had stood for 10,000 years as the center of galactic civilization. But things were about to change. The Council had crossed a line when they tried to take human colonies. They had pushed too far, and now they would learn what happened when you backed humans into a corner. Daniel opened a secure channel to Earth Command. "This is Ambassador Carter," he said. "I am returning home. Tell the fleet to prepare for contact. The Council is coming, and they will not be diplomatic about it." The response came back immediately. "Understood, Ambassador. Fleet Admiral Chen sends her regards. She says to tell you that humanity is ready. We have been ready for a long time." Daniel closed the channel and watched as his shuttle jumped into hyperspace. Behind him, the Council was mobilizing for war. Ahead of him, humanity was preparing to fight. The galaxy was about to change forever, and there was no going back now. The Zephronian battle fleet arrived at New Terra 3 days after Daniel Carter left the Council chamber. 15 warships emerged from hyperspace, and each one was massive enough to reduce a planet's surface to glass. They had been sent to enforce the Council's decree, and their commander, war leader Draxus, made his intentions clear in a system-wide broadcast that reached every human settlement on the planet below, humans. Of New Terra, the transmission began, and Draxus spoke with the casual arrogance of someone who had never faced real resistance. "You have 24 hours to evacuate this world. After that time, we will consider any remaining presence to be hostile and will act accordingly. Gather your belongings and prepare for transport. The Zephronian Mining Consortium has claimed this world under council law." On the bridge of the Valiant, Jack Morrison watched the Zephronian fleet take up positions around the planet. His own ship was joined by 7 others, and together they represented the entire human presence in the sector. 8 ships against 15. The odds were not good, but Jack had stopped caring about odds 3 days ago when he made his decision to come here. Lieutenant Amy Parker sat at her console and ran the numbers again, even though she already knew what they would show. "They outgun us 3-1, she reported, and her voice was steady despite what the sensor data revealed. "Their shields are twice as strong as ours, and their weapons have better range. In a straight fight, we would last maybe 10 minutes. But they are slow," added Lieutenant Commander Ryan Hughes from the tactical station. He was studying the Zephronian formation with the eye of someone who had spent his entire career learning how to fight. "And they haven't fought a real war in centuries. The Zephronians are used to intimidating smaller species into submission. They expect us to run." Captain Helen Brooks stood in the center of the bridge with her arms crossed. She had been awake for 36 hours, and the exhaustion showed on her face, but her mind was still sharp. "The question is, are we really going to do this? Once we fire the first shot, there is no going back. Earth Command has given us authorization to defend the colony, but they have also made it clear that we are on our own if things go badly." Jack thought about the colonists below. He had visited New Terra twice during his career. He remembered meeting a family who had lived there for 3 generations. The grandfather had been one of the original settlers, and he had shown Jack pictures of what the land looked like when they first arrived. Barren rock and alien plants that could not be eaten. Now there were fields of wheat and entire forests that had been planted by human hands. The Council wanted to erase all of that for mining rights that would profit the Zephronians and no one else. "We are doing this," Jack said. There was no doubt in his voice. "Those people down there are our responsibility. If we run now, then every human colony in the galaxy will know that Earth cannot protect them. We make our stand here." Helen nodded slowly. "Then we do it smart. Ryan, I want firing solutions on their command ship and their 2 largest carriers. Amy, plot microjump coordinates. We are going to hit them fast and disappear before they can lock weapons on us. We use every advantage we have, Captain Ryan said, and a grin spread across his face. They won't know what hit them. He began entering commands into his console, and the ship's weapon systems came online. The Valiant was not the newest ship in the human fleet, and it was not the most powerful, but it had one advantage that the Zephronians did not expect. It had a crew that was willing to fight. All ships Helen broadcast to the small human fleet. This is Captain Brooks. In approximately 2 minutes, we are going to show the Galactic Council that humanity is done playing by their rules. Target your assigned ships and prepare for microjump on my mark. Stay tight and stay focused. We get one chance at this. The other 7 ships acknowledged, and Jack could hear the tension in their voices. They were all volunteers who had chosen to stay and fight even though they knew the risks. Some of them had families back on Earth. Some of them had never fired a shot in anger before. But they were all here because they believed that some things were worth fighting for. The Zephronian fleet hung in space, and their formation showed their confidence. They had positioned themselves in a standard blockade pattern that was designed to prevent any ship from reaching the planet. War leader Draxus probably expected the human ships to either run or surrender. The Zephronians had crushed rebellions before, and they had enforced council decrees for millennia. Humans were just another primitive species that needed to learn their place in the galactic order. They never saw it coming. All ships jump, Helen ordered, and her voice was calm. The Valiant and 7 other human ships vanished from their positions and reappeared directly in the middle of the Zephronian formation. The transition from hyperspace to normal space took less than a second, and the human ships were already firing before the Zephronians could react. The Valiant's weapons discharged, and plasma torpedoes streaked across space toward the Zephronian command ship. The massive vessel tried to raise shields, but the weapons struck before the defensive systems could activate. Explosions ripped through the command ship's bridge, and the lights went dark. The vessel began to tumble through space, and its engines went offline. Around them, the other human ships executed their attacks with precision. 2 Zephronian carriers exploded before they could launch their fighter wings. The fighters were still in their hangar bays when the ships died, and thousands of Zephronian pilots never had a chance to reach their craft. Another 3 Zephronian ships suffered catastrophic damage to their engines, and they went spinning away from the formation. The human fleet moved like a pack of predators, and each ship covered the others. They had practiced this maneuver in simulations for years, but this was the first time they had used it in actual combat. The coordination was perfect because every captain knew exactly what the others would do. They fired and moved and fired again, and the Zephronians could not keep up. Jack watched the tactical display and felt a fierce pride. The Zephronians had thought they were dealing with primitive humans who barely understood space combat. They were learning the hard way that humanity had been fighting wars since before most galactic species had discovered fire. Humans knew tactics and strategy, and most importantly, they knew how to work together when everything was on the line. And then, as quickly as they had appeared, the human ships vanished back into hyperspace. The entire engagement lasted 90 seconds. When the human fleet was gone, the Zephronian formation was in ruins. 3 capital ships were completely destroyed. 5 more were crippled and drifting. The remaining 7 ships were undamaged, but their commanders were in shock. On New Terra, 2 million colonists watched the orbital battle on their screens. Every house and every building had access to the defense network feeds. When the human fleet disappeared and the Zephronian formation lay broken, something happened that the Galactic Council had never witnessed before in their long history. Humanity cheered. The sound rose from every settlement and every farm. People poured into the streets and celebrated. Children who had been afraid that they would lose their homes now danced with joy. Parents who had been preparing to evacuate instead opened bottles of wine and toasted the brave crews who had defended them. In the Valiant's bridge, Helen allowed herself a small smile. "Status report," she ordered. "Minor hull damage to the Liberty, and it is easily repaired," Ryan reported. "No casualties across the fleet. All ships are accounted for and ready for another engagement if needed." He paused and then added with satisfaction, "The Zephronians lost 3 capital ships and 5 more are crippled. They are completely combat ineffective, and the rest," Helen asked. Amy checked her sensors. "They are retreating. The remaining ships are jumping out of the system. I think we scared them, Skipper." Jack let out a breath he did not know he had been holding. "We just declared war on the Galactic Council," he said quietly. "No," Helen corrected. We just showed them that we will not be pushed around anymore. There is a difference." But even as she said it, she knew that Jack was right. What they had done here would echo across the galaxy. The Council had never tolerated defiance, and they would not start now. Ryan pulled up long-range sensor data. "We are getting reports from other human colonies. Ships are moving to defensive positions everywhere. Earth Command is broadcasting orders for all fleet elements to return to human space." "This is bigger than just New Terra now," Helen nodded. "It was always going to be bigger than one colony. The Council picked the wrong fight and the wrong species. Now we show them what humans can do when they stop asking for permission." "Communications are coming in from the surface," Amy reported. "The colonial governor wants to speak with you, Captain, and there are about 2 million colonists who want to say thank you." "Tell the governor we will contact him shortly," Helen said. "Right now we need to prepare for the next phase. The Zephronians will report what happened here and the Council will respond. They will send more ships and those ships will be ready for our tactics. Then we will come up with new tactics," Jack said. "That is what humans do. We adapt and we overcome. The Council is about to learn that the hard way." The emergency session of the Galactic Council was unlike anything the galaxy had seen in recorded history. Every representative was present, and even species that had not attended a full session in decades sent their delegates. The attack on the Zephronian fleet had sent shockwaves through the entire political structure of known space. War leader Draxus had returned to Zentari Prime with 7 damaged ships and a report that no one wanted to believe. "This is an act of war," Thex's Zaylor roared, and his massive frame shook with rage. "The humans attacked without provocation. They destroyed our ships and killed thousands of our people. They must be punished. Their worlds must be sanctioned and their fleets destroyed. We cannot allow this insult to stand." The matriarch of the Corvathian Empire raised a clawed hand for silence. The council chamber fell quiet because when the matriarch spoke, everyone listened. "The council must present a united response," she said. "I propose a full military blockade of all human worlds and the immediate expulsion of humanity from the council. We will show them what happens when a junior species forgets its place." The vote was swift. 53 species voted in favor and 8 abstained and 6 voted against. Humanity's seat on the council was declared vacant. Trade with human worlds was forbidden. Any species that continued to deal with Earth would face sanctions themselves. The council had spoken, and now they would enforce their will with military power. What the council did not know was that humanity had been preparing for this moment since the day they joined. Admiral Lisa Chen stood in the war room beneath the Pacific Ocean 3 miles below the surface, where no orbital weapon could reach. Around her, holographic displays showed every human world and every ship and every asset humanity possessed. She had been waiting for this day for 20 years. "Execute Protocol Defiance," she said quietly. The order went out on encrypted channels that the council did not even know existed. Across human space, hidden facilities powered up. Shipyards that had been disguised as mining operations revealed their true purpose. On dozens of worlds underground, hangar doors opened and ships began to lift off. These were not the small patrol craft that the council knew about. These were warships that had been built in secret over 3 decades. Destroyers and cruisers and carriers that matched or exceeded anything the council species possessed. While humanity had smiled and played, nice what the Council Earth Command had been preparing for. War Lieutenant Amy Parker had been promoted to commander and given her own ship after the Battle of New Terra. The vessel was called the Defiant, and it was one of the new generation of human warships. She stood on her bridge and watched as the fleet assembled around Earth. 20 ships became 50 and then 100 and then 200. Ships kept arriving from hidden bases that even most of the human military had not known existed. "Where did all these ships come from?" her executive officer asked. He was staring at the tactical display in disbelief. "We have been building them in secret for 30 years, Amy said. She was reading the classified briefing that had been transmitted to all ship commanders. While we smiled and played nice with the Council Earth Command was preparing for the day, we would have to fight. Every mining station and every remote outpost had a secondary purpose. We were building an armada. Captain Jack Morrison received his own promotion after New Terra. He was given command of a heavy cruiser called the Dauntless and assigned to lead a battle group in the outer colonies. His former captain Helen Brooks was now Admiral Brooks, and she was coordinating fleet operations across 3 sectors. The small crew that had defended New Terra together was now scattered across human space, but they all shared the same mission. The Council fleet began to move within a week. They assembled a force of over 300 ships drawn from a dozen different species. It was the largest military fleet in galactic history, and it was sent with one purpose: crush the human rebellion and remind the galaxy who was in charge. The Council expected an easy victory because humans were primitives who had barely been in space for a century. They were wrong. The Battle of Rigel 4 became the turning point. The Council fleet arrived expecting to find a lightly defended human colony. Instead, they found 90 human warships waiting for them. Admiral Brooks commanded the defense, and she had prepared the battlefield carefully. The humans had seeded the system with mines and positioned weapons platforms in the asteroid belt. They knew every rock and every gravitational current. The Council fleet came in with overwhelming confidence. They had numbers and firepower and thousands of years of experience. What they did not have was recent combat experience. The elder species had not fought a real war in centuries. They had forgotten what desperation looked like, and they had forgotten what it meant to fight an enemy that refused to surrender. Human tactics were unlike anything the galaxy had seen. Ships would use asteroid fields for cover, and then emerge to fire before disappearing again. They deployed mines and hyperspace lanes that damaged Council ships before the battle even began. They coordinated their attacks with a precision that came from centuries of military evolution on Earth, but it was their willingness to take risks that truly shocked the Council. Forces. Human ships would ram Council vessels, if it meant protecting their fleet. Captains would sacrifice their own ships to create openings for others. When a human destroyer was critically damaged, its captain ordered the crew to evacuate and then flew the dying ship directly into a Council carrier. The explosion took out both vessels, but it also destroyed the carrier's entire fighter wing. The Council commanders had never seen anything like it. Their own crews fought bravely, but they fought to survive. Human crews fought to win, and there was a difference. When the smoke cleared at Rigel 474, Council ships were destroyed or disabled. The human fleet lost 38 vessels, but they held the system. The Council fleet retreated for the first time in recorded history. News of the battle spread across the galaxy faster than light. Species that had long chafed under Council rule saw humanity's resistance and found their own courage. The Talarian Confederacy announced they would no longer follow Council economic decrees. The Mashara Collective closed their borders to Council inspectors. 6 minor species officially recognized human sovereignty and opened direct diplomatic relations with Earth. The Council was fracturing. For 10,000 years, they had maintained order through a combination of economic pressure and military threat. But now a junior species had fought them to a standstill, and other species were taking notice. If humans could defy the Council, then maybe others could too. Jack Morrison survived Rigel 4, though the Dauntless took heavy damage. 3 of his crew died in the battle, and he wrote letters to their families personally. He had never lost anyone under his command before, and the weight of it sat heavy on his shoulders. But he also knew that their sacrifice had meaning. They had died defending human colonies and human freedom. The war continued for months. There were battles in a dozen systems, and both sides won victories. The Council had more ships, but humanity had better tactics and stronger motivation. Human crews were fighting for their homes, while Council forces were enforcing a decree that many of them privately disagreed with. That difference showed in every engagement. Admiral Lisa Chen coordinated the war effort from Earth, and she made difficult decisions every day. She sent ships into battles knowing some would not return. She ordered strikes on Council supply lines that cut off food and medicine to their forces. She authorized attacks that killed thousands. But she never wavered because she knew what was at stake. If humanity lost this war, they would be expelled from the galaxy. Their colonies would be taken, and their people would be scattered. Earth itself might face bombardment. The Council had the power to destroy human civilization completely. So Lisa fought with everything she had, and she pushed her commanders to do the same. Ambassador Daniel Carter found himself in an unlikely position during the war. Species that had long been dominated by the Council began to reach out to Earth. They wanted to know how humanity had prepared. They wanted to form alliances. Some even wanted to join the fight against the Council. Daniel coordinated with these species and helped build a coalition of the willing. The Council leadership watched as their authority crumbled. The matriarch called emergency session after emergency session, but nothing seemed to stop the bleeding. More species were defying Council decrees. Trade networks that had existed for millennia were collapsing. The economic foundation of Council power was breaking apart. 6 months into the war, the Valaxian delegate made a private communication to Daniel. The being of pure energy that had once mocked humanity now spoke with respect. The Council wishes to discuss terms, it said. We cannot win this war, and we know it. But we cannot surrender publicly without losing everything. We need a way to end this that allows both sides to save face. Daniel listened carefully. He knew that humanity could not win a war of attrition. Earth had fewer ships and fewer resources than the combined Council species. But the Council did not know that. They only knew that humans kept fighting and kept winning and showed no signs of stopping. Fear was a powerful weapon. The peace negotiations took place on a neutral station at the edge of Council space. The station had been built centuries ago as a trading post between different galactic sectors, and now it served as the meeting ground between two sides that had been at war for 18 months. Ambassador Daniel Carter sat across from the matriarch of the Corvathian Empire, and the Valaxian delegate and representatives from a dozen other species. The room was quiet except for the hum of life support systems. You have brought chaos to the galaxy, the matriarch said, and her tone was weary rather than angry. Her multiple eyes looked tired, and Daniel realized that the war had aged her in ways that decades of peace never had. Thousands have died because of your defiance. Entire trade networks have collapsed. Species that were once allies now refuse to speak to each other. What have you accomplished except destruction? Daniel leaned forward. No, matriarch. We revealed the chaos that was always there. You built a system where a few elder species controlled everything, and everyone else had to accept it. You expected gratitude from species you exploited. That was never going to last. We just forced the issue sooner rather than later. So what do you propose? The Valaxian asked. Its crystalline form pulsed with different colors as it processed the situation. You have fought us to a standstill, but you cannot win a prolonged war. Your resources are limited and your worlds are vulnerable. We could continue this conflict for years and both sides would suffer. There must be a better way. Daniel slid a data tablet across the table. He had spent weeks preparing this document with input from Earth Command and human colonies across the galaxy. A new council, he said. Equal representation for all species, regardless of age or seniority. Decisions made by majority vote, not by decree from the powerful. Respect for the sovereignty of all member species. No more forced evacuations. No more dismissing entire civilizations as too young to matter. The matriarch picked up the tablet with one clawed hand. She read through the proposal slowly, and Daniel watched her expression change. You ask us to give up power we have held for millennia, she said quietly. You ask us to treat species that have barely left their home systems as our equals. This is not reform. This is revolution. Then call it whatever you want, Daniel replied. But understand this. Humanity is not going back to being submissive. And neither are the dozens of species who have seen what we did. The Talarians have already withdrawn from council oversight. The Mishara have closed their borders. 6 other species have formed a mutual defense pact with Earth. Your authority is crumbling whether you acknowledge it or not. Thexaler, the Zephronian representative, shifted his massive bulk. His species had lost more ships than any other in the war. And if we refuse your terms, if we choose to continue the war until you are defeated, what then, human? Daniel met his gaze without flinching. Then we fight until one side cannot fight anymore. Human colonies will be destroyed and council worlds will burn. More species will leave your organization until there is nothing left. You will have won a war but lost everything that made the council matter. Is that really what you want? The room fell silent. The other representatives looked at each other, and Daniel could see the calculations happening behind alien eyes. They were weighing costs and benefits and trying to determine if their pride was worth the price they would have to pay. Finally, the matriarch spoke again. The council will need time to consider these proposals, she said. We cannot make such fundamental changes without consulting our home governments. But I will say this, Ambassador Carter. What you have done has changed the galaxy forever. Whether that change is for better or worse remains to be seen. The negotiations continued for 3 more weeks. There were arguments and compromises and moments when it seemed like the talks would collapse entirely. But slowly a framework began to emerge. The Galactic Council would be reformed. Every species would have equal voting rights. A new charter would protect the sovereignty of member worlds. Military action would require approval from 2/3 of members, not just the elder species. Admiral Lisa Chen reviewed the treaty from her office on Earth. She sat in the same room where she had given the order to execute Protocol Defiance, and she thought about everything that had happened since. 2,000 human lives lost in the war. Dozens of ships destroyed. Entire colonies damaged by council attacks. But they had won something more important than territory or resources. They had won respect. The treaty was signed on the same neutral station where the negotiations had taken place. Daniel Carter represented humanity, and he stood alongside representatives from 60 species. The elder species signed reluctantly, but they signed. They had realized that the old order was dead and something new had to take its place. Some species, like the Talarians and the Mishara, signed enthusiastically because they saw the treaty as liberation from council domination. Captain Jack Morrison attended the signing ceremony. He stood in his dress uniform with medals on his chest for the battles he had fought. Next to him stood Commander Amy Parker and dozens of other officers who had served during the war. They watched as the treaty was finalized, and they knew that their sacrifice had meant something. Admiral Helen Brooks stood with Admiral Chen. The two women had coordinated humanity's defense throughout the war, and now they watched as that war officially ended. "We did it," Helen said quietly. "We actually did it," Lisa nodded. "We showed them that humanity will not be pushed around. We showed them that we deserve a place at the table as equals. But more importantly, we showed every other species in the galaxy that the Council is not invincible. That is going to change everything." The new Galactic Council held its first session 3 months after the treaty was signed. The chamber on Zentari Prime had been redesigned. Instead of rings based on seniority, all species now sat in a circle. Every representative could see every other representative. The symbolism was clear. Daniel Carter took his seat and looked around at the other ambassadors. Some of them had fought against humanity during the war. Others had supported human independence. But now they were all equal members of a new organization. The first vote was symbolic but important, a resolution recognizing the sovereignty of all member worlds and condemning forced relocations. It passed unanimously. After the session ended, the matriarch approached Daniel. She moved slowly because the war had taken something from her. "For 10,000 years, my species helped maintain order in this galaxy," she said. "We believed we were doing good. We believed that younger species needed guidance and structure. Perhaps we were wrong." Daniel considered his response carefully. "You were not entirely wrong, matriarch. The galaxy did need structure and cooperation, but it also needed to be fair. The old council was not fair. This new one has a chance to be better. Whether it succeeds depends on all of us." The matriarch nodded slowly. "Your species is remarkable, Ambassador. You were part of the council for only 43 years, and yet you changed it completely. I wonder what else humanity will accomplish." Over the following years, historians would debate the exact moment when humanity transitioned from a junior species to a galactic power. Some pointed to the Battle of Rigel 4, where human tactics defeated a superior force. Others cited Daniel Carter's speech to the council that started everything. Some mentioned the secret shipyards and the decades of preparation that made human resistance possible. But those who lived through it knew the truth. The moment came when ordinary humans decided that enough was enough. When Jack Morrison and Helen Brooks and Amy Parker and thousands of others looked at an impossible situation and chose to fight rather than submit. When colonists on New Terra and dozens of other worlds refused to abandon their homes. When Earth Command executed a plan that had been decades in the making. Jack Morrison eventually retired from military service. He returned to New Terra where he had fought his first battle. The colony had grown in the years since the war. New settlements had been built and the population had doubled. Children who had watched the battle from the surface were now adults with children of their own. They remembered the day that human ships had defended their world, and they made sure their children remembered too. Jack stood on a hill overlooking one of the new settlements. Amy Parker stood next to him. She had also retired and chosen to settle on New Terra. They watched the sun set over fields that humans had cultivated from alien soil. "This is what we fought for," Amy said. "Not glory or power, just the right for people to live their lives in peace." Jack nodded. The council crossed a line when they tried to take this away. They thought humanity would just accept it, because we always had before. They were wrong. "Do you think it will last?" Amy asked. "The new council and the peace treaty and all of it? Or will the elder species eventually try to take back their power?" Jack smiled. "They can try, but they know now what happens when they push humanity too far. We snapped once and we will snap again if we have to. That is the lesson they learned. Humanity will defend what is ours, and we will never ask for permission to exist. 50 years after the war, the galaxy was a different place. The Galactic Council functioned as a true democratic body where every species had a voice.